Some jobs come with strange paperwork. Some come with strange hours. But out in the Arizona desert, one job came with something totally mind-boggling. Something the government won't talk about. Something that doesn't want to be found, but doesn't want to be forgotten either. This is what happened to a welder named Nolan during a night shift at the edge of nowhere. So hold tight to the reins and keep your eyes wide open, because once this ride starts, there's no getting off. Nobody tells you how quiet it gets out there. I'm talking about the Vulture Mine in Arizona, what's left of it anyway. The mine sits about 15 miles outside Wickenburg, which is northwest of Phoenix. Desert all around. No power lines, no neighbors, just rock, sun, and silence. I took a contract gig there last fall, welding and torching down old frames for a company that was prepping the site for some kind of federal remediation project. They didn't say what needed remediating, and I didn't ask. You show up, get paid, keep your head down. I was the night guy, welded whatever needed reinforcing or disassembling in the cooler hours. No team, just me, a locker, a utility shed with a radio that only picked up one station, and about 300 yards of fencing I never saw anyone check. The mine had been sealed up long ago, or so I thought. First few nights were uneventful. I'd set up shop under the old conveyor line and torch scrap until my shift was over. Dust would settle in my boots, sweat would crust on my shirt, and coyotes would cry out somewhere far enough away to be harmless. Then one night, around 1:30 a.m., I heard movement in the pit. Not rocks falling, not a breeze. Actual movement. Something big. I turned off the torch, took off the hood, listened. It sounded like shuffling, heavy and steady, like someone was dragging something slow across gravel. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the edge of the pit, the mouth of the mine. It had been collapsed and sealed decades ago, but the rocks looked disturbed, like something had pushed its way out from underneath. I radioed base in Wickenburg. Noise in the pit, I said. Possibly wildlife, requesting spotlight drone sweep. The guy on the other end hesitated. Then he said, "Negative. Stay put. We'll log it." That was it. No follow-up, no confirmation, just a log entry. I went back to work, but I kept my torch closer and my ears open. Next night, same time, same sound. This time, it was closer. I didn't need the flashlight to hear it, and it wasn't dragging anymore. It was stepping. Heavy, deliberate, bipedal steps. Something two-legged. I stood behind the loader, half-crouched, heart racing. I didn't see anything, but the air felt different, charged, like right before lightning hits. Then a scream cut through the night. Not human, not coyote. Something low and rumbling made the tools on the bench vibrate. I reported it again. Got the same answer. Logged. Stay put. Stay put, I repeated out loud. I thought about leaving, but they paid well, too well, and I'd signed all kinds of NDA paperwork when I started, so I stayed. Fourth night, I brought a game cam and mounted it on a tripod by the edge of the pit. Figured if anything came up, I'd have proof. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Louder this time, closer. Something thudded onto the dirt about 50 feet from me. I didn't move. I turned off my torch, crouched behind the steel bins, and waited. Then I saw it. At first I thought it was a man, but it wasn't. It was covered in coarse, dark hair, 7 feet tall at least, shoulders like a linebacker. Its arms were long and ended in wide, flat hands. It sniffed the air, head tilting like it was tracking something. Its eyes caught my light for half a second, and they glowed. Not reflected, glowed. It grunted, deep, then turned back toward the pit and disappeared down into it, slipping between the rocks like it had done it 100 times. I checked the camera the next morning. File corrupted, completely wiped. When I reported the sighting, the line went dead. 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside the fence. No lights, no headlights, just rolled in quiet. 2 guys in matching tactical gear got out. No names, no ranks. One of them carried a tablet. The other had a case that looked military. They didn't talk to me at first, just walked the perimeter, looked at the pit, looked at the camera. Then the guy with the case pulled out a device and scanned the ground. He nodded. The other guy finally turned to me and said, "You didn't see anything." I asked who they were. He didn't answer. "You keep welding, Mr. Nolan. You keep your shift. You keep your mouth shut. You'll get a bonus on your next deposit." He said it like a fact, not a threat, but I knew what it was. I should have quit, packed up, and left. But curiosity's a mean habit. A week later, I rigged a motion sensor down by the pit entrance. I used old pressure plates from a salvage yard job. Primitive, but it worked. That night, 1:48 a.m., it triggered. I killed the lights and waited. The creature came out slower this time, looked cautious. It sniffed the air, made a low clicking sound with its throat. Then it did something I didn't expect. It looked right at the sensor, and it smiled. A wide, toothy grin. Not friendly, just showing it understood, like it knew exactly what I'd done. Then it picked up a rock the size of a microwave and threw it. Direct hit, smashed the sensor, crushed the plate. The whole area lit up from the impact, and that's when I saw them. More of them. 3 shapes behind it, smaller, quieter, watching. The big one let out a sound like a warning, a bark crossed with a roar, and they vanished again, back down into the mine. Next day, the company trailer was gone, just gone. All logs wiped, office stripped. My badge still worked, but there was no contact number anymore. Emails bounced. No one answered the old dispatch radio. But my account still got paid. More even. Extra 10 grand wired that same morning. They wanted me to stay. I spent the rest of the week welding steel panels over the old shaft. No one told me to. I just did. Didn't matter. By the end of the week, the panels were bent from the inside, like something had pushed hard. The final night I was there, I stayed in the utility shed and kept the lights off. I had one of those cheap thermal scopes left over from a hog hunt. I watched from the tiny window. At 2:06 a.m., one of them came out, but not the big one. This one was smaller, lankier, hair matted and reddish. It carried something. Looked like a piece of old tech, a radio maybe. It sat cross-legged near my scrap bin and took the thing apart. Claws, nimble, careful. It wasn't dumb, not even close. Then it looked up, right at me. I didn't move, didn't breathe. It stood slowly, left the device behind, and walked back into the pit. And this time I swear I heard it whisper something. Not a language I knew, but words. That was 2 months ago. I left, changed numbers, moved jobs, but the money keeps coming. Bonuses I didn't earn, deposits with no name attached. I think they want me quiet. And I also think they want me to remember, because sometimes, just after midnight, I get a ping on my phone. GPS marker, vulture mine. It only lasts a second, then it vanishes. But that's enough. It means they're still down there, and they know I'm not far. I've been roaming around the White Mountains for a few weeks, trying to get a sense of the region and any bizarre sightings that local hikers might have encountered, and I believe I stumbled across something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It happened a few miles from the summit of Mount Washington, up near the Alpine Garden Trail. I'd spent the day recording notes on local fauna, mostly just stuff like the American marten, some moose tracks, typical wildlife up there. But as the evening started closing in, I caught a glimpse of what I can only describe as a massive, upright canine figure. Though calling it just a figure doesn't sit right with me, because it had this glint in its eyes that felt almost too intense to be a mere animal. The craziest part is that I wasn't even looking for cryptids that day. I know that might sound strange given my interests, but at the time I was basically just updating my field notes on local species diversity. My plan was to head down toward Tuckerman Ravine before dark, because the area can be treacherous in bad weather, and I'd already encountered a sudden shift in wind speeds near the summit earlier that morning. Went from 20 miles per hour gusts to something like 50 miles per hour in just under half an hour, which apparently isn't uncommon up there given Mount Washington's notorious reputation for extreme weather. Long story short, I was pretty focused on the ground in front of me because of the steepness, occasionally glancing at the ridgeline to my left for any sign of a sudden storm rolling in. While I was moving down, I heard something. It sounded like a deep huff, as if a big animal was clearing its throat or sniffing the air. I paused, expecting maybe a black bear, because they're around, but you usually don't find them that high up near the Alpine Garden. Then, as I was scanning the rock ledges maybe 20 or 30 yards away, I saw this silhouette, something tall, probably at least 6 feet if I had to guess. The weird thing is that it had a canine shape in the face, almost like a large shepherd-type dog, but it was standing on 2 legs. There was this moment where it tilted its head and seemed to be studying me, like it was trying to decide if I posed a threat, or maybe if I was potential prey. Hard to say, but I can recall that detail so vividly. Head tilt, ears erect, and that slow side-to-side movement like it was trying to get a better look at me. I know how insane that sounds. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 seconds max. The way it moved off was so fluid that at first I thought it might be a trick of the light. But no, it was definitely a living creature. It took off along the ridgeline, crossing over rocky terrain on 2 legs with an occasional drop to all 4s, kind of a galloping motion, but not exactly. It was like it was built to run on 2 legs or 4, switching between them whenever it needed. The speed was incredible. I tried to mentally note how it placed its hands or paws on the rocks. They looked elongated, like elongated forelimbs with what might have been claws, though I was too far away to be sure. After it was gone, I just stood there, heart pounding, trying to rationalize it. I went through a mental checklist: bear with mange, an odd wolf, a person wearing some strange gear, but none of it made sense. A big part of me wanted to run down as fast as possible to the Pinkham Notch Visitor Center and at least share what I saw with the staff, but I also had this weird hesitation about sounding like a lunatic. You know, you walk in and say, "I just saw a gigantic dog man up near the Alpine Garden," and you're kind of waving a big red flag of this person's lost it. So I ended up just heading down quietly, grabbing some dinner at the cafeteria near the base and trying to collect my thoughts. The next morning, I planned to go back up for a second look. I got up super early, around 5 a.m., to catch the sunrise. For a while, I sulked around the main trails leading up, asking a couple of folks if they'd seen anything strange. Inevitably, you get the standard no, or maybe they mention hearing weird howls at night, but they assume it's coyotes. Nobody described anything close to what I saw. At some point, I decided I'd just try to retrace my steps. The weather turned sour pretty quickly. Mount Washington does that. Clouds rolled in, wind started howling around 40 miles per hour. Visibility was down to maybe 20 yards in places. I realized it was not going to be the best time for a follow-up search unless I wanted to become a missing persons case. I didn't find any footprints that screamed dog man, just some weird scuff marks on the stones that might well have been just natural wear or other hikers. I've seen all sorts of alleged cryptids in weird corners of the country. I've been in the Pine Barrens hunting for the Jersey Devil sightings, spent time in the Pacific Northwest scouring for evidence of Bigfoot, even interviewed old-timers in southwestern Pennsylvania about alleged dogman sightings near the Chestnut Ridge. And let me tell you, after seeing what I saw up near Mount Washington, I'm pretty well convinced there's something canine-like roaming those harsh slopes. It might not be unique, though. I remember reading a snippet about wolfish creatures in old New England folklore. Could be connected, or maybe this is just a variant of the same phenomenon people call dogman or upright canines. But seeing it in that slopey, rocky environment took me by surprise, because I usually associate these sightings with forested areas or farmland edges, not the top of the highest peak in the Northeast. I had a personal debate with myself for days about whether or not to mention it publicly. Part of me wants to keep combing the region for more evidence: footprints, hair samples, eyewitness testimony from local hikers. But I also figure I owe it to the research community to get the story out there. Someone else might have seen something, or maybe they've noticed large canine tracks in places they wouldn't expect them. I even had a conversation with a part-time employee at the Mount Washington Cog Railway base station, just in passing. I was kind of fishing for any mention of unusual sightings, and he told me in a roundabout way that there are always rumors in the White Mountains about something that walks like a man, but isn't. He didn't specify if it was Bigfoot or something else, but it gave me chills. Anyway, I realized this account might not come across as scientifically rigorous because I didn't get a video or even a clear photograph. Everything happened so fast. My phone was in my pocket, and I was too startled to think about capturing it. By the time I could have tried, it was already bounding away. The only thing I truly have are the notes I scribbled down in my field journal that night, describing its coloration, mostly dark grayish, maybe some patches of lighter fur around the neck or shoulders. The eyes were reflective, almost amber in color. The muzzle was definitely shorter than a typical wolf's, but not by much. Ears were pointed. If I had to gauge the height, maybe around 6.5 to 7 feet tall when it was upright. The impression I got was of something that could easily outrun or overpower a human if it wanted to. Even now, I find myself glancing over my shoulder whenever I'm anywhere near the tree line or above. Maybe that's paranoia creeping in, but it's such a vivid image in my mind. If I hadn't witnessed it myself, I'd probably poke holes in someone else's story, like, well, you were tired. You saw a bear from a weird angle in bad light. Or you're just confusing it with a wolf or a large coyote. But I was wide awake, and visibility was decent even if evening was approaching. Plus, that upright stance and the agility it showed. No normal canine moves like that. Not on 2 legs, not for that length of time. That's pretty much it for now. I might head back up there in a few weeks, see if I can do some nighttime observation with better equipment, maybe a thermal imaging camera if I can borrow one. I'm not sure how wise that is, but the curiosity is eating at me. How else are we going to document new cryptids if we don't push the boundaries a bit? I've been looking after the old Monon Depot in Bedford, Indiana for about 5 years now, and I mostly handle routine maintenance, odds and ends, just generally making sure everything's in presentable shape for visitors. The place is from 1901, and it's got these old limestone walls and a small museum area dedicated to the old Monon Railroad. Not a lot of people come out except for the occasional train enthusiast or local history buff, but I do have a couple of diehards who come around on a regular basis. Anyway, a few weeks ago, I started noticing something really strange on some of the old boxcars we keep on a side track for display. There are deep, ragged claw marks carved into the metal, or at least they look like claw marks. They're wide-spaced, not like the scrapes you might get from a piece of equipment or old tree branch. They're far too large and too deliberate to be a random, accidental scrape. At first, I thought maybe some kids from the local high school were vandalizing the train to get a thrill. But if that's the case, they've got monstrous knives or something similar, except it really doesn't look like blade damage to me. I'm actually not one to jump to weird paranormal conclusions. My boss and I used to laugh at the local legends when folks said they saw bizarre creatures lurking around the outskirts of town, mostly coyote sightings, or stray dogs rummaging through trash in the alleyways behind older houses on J Street. But this is different. I showed the marks to an old friend of mine who works at a local auto body shop, just to see if he recognized the pattern. He commented that it looked less like a tool and more like some massive animal was testing its claws against the side of the boxcar. That's his exact wording. "Looks like a big critter wanted to see if the metal would bend," he said. "Now, I don't know about you, but in southern Indiana, we've got our fair share of wildlife. Bobcats, coyotes, foxes, even the occasional black bear that wanders down from farther north. But these marks, they're at a height maybe 5 or 6 feet off the ground. Not impossible for a bear, I guess, but it's an incredibly odd pattern. 4 distinct claws, curved slightly inwards, leaving deep gouges. There's this small group in Mitchell that's always talking about something called the Dog Man. I never took it seriously. I heard them mention your YouTube channel once in passing, but I didn't pay much attention at the time. They claimed Dogman sightings stretch all over the Midwest, especially near old railway lines that cut through wooded areas. They say these creatures move at night, and they're extremely territorial. I used to roll my eyes at that. I really did. But I can't shake the thought that something unusually large and powerful might be skulking around. We have wildlife cameras around the property for insurance reasons and to prevent copper thieves from messing with the old cables and fittings. I reviewed a bunch of the footage from around the time I found the claw marks. There were a few nights where the cameras glitched, random static, and then I've got one clip that's just 4 minutes of black screen. When the picture comes back, everything's normal. Doesn't prove anything, just kind of unsettling. Deep in the corner of one video, if you pause at the right moment, there's a fraction of a second where I see something move on 2 legs behind the boxcars. The angle is terrible because the camera is perched on the depot roof for a wide shot of the property. But in that quick moment, the shape is definitely upright, and if I'm not mistaken, it carries a hunched posture. It disappears behind the corner before I can get a better look. I hesitate to say it's some wolf-like figure, but it's definitely not a person wearing normal street clothes. No visible reflection of eyes, no clarity to the silhouette. And right after that, the camera goes black. Maybe it's a malfunction with the system, but it's just too bizarre a coincidence. I started asking around, discreetly, to see if people had heard any commotion late at night, like howls or strange snarling. A security guard over at the old Indiana Limestone Company building a few blocks down told me he has been hearing weird growls echoing across the yard for a while. He chalked it up to feral dogs, but he did mention the noises seemed bigger somehow, like from a larger animal. Another coworker of mine said she nearly clipped a huge dog with her truck along Mitchell Road a month ago. Whatever it was, it stood so tall that she could see its back over the hood of her Ford F-150. She swears there was something unnatural about its movement, but she didn't stick around to find out more, and this was only about 4 miles from the depot. The weird thing is, I've been caretaker here for years, and up until now, we never had any talk of giant canine creatures roaming around. It feels like it kicked up in the last year or so. The boxcars we keep on display, some of them date back to the 1930s, from the old Monon Railroad days. They're made of heavy steel. I've never known any typical animal to damage those cars quite like what I've seen. It's hard to describe the exact moment I started feeling uneasy, but now I find myself doing more nightly checks than usual, always carrying a hefty flashlight and listening for anything out of the ordinary. I've also looked at the underside of one of the cars and found more scoring marks that seem to be from the same claws. It's as if something tried to crawl underneath the car or latch onto the area where the wheels are. It left behind a few tufts of coarse, dark hair snagged on a sharp edge under the boxcar. I wore gloves and used tweezers to collect a sample, thinking maybe I'd have it tested, but I haven't worked up the nerve to walk into a local vet and ask them to analyze some hair from a potential dog man. The local vets already think I'm crazy for feeding the stray cats around the depot. If they hear I'm chasing cryptid leads, they might just toss me out on my ear. Speaking of stray cats, We used to have a whole colony living around the back loading dock. Lately, it seems like the population has drastically dropped. I assumed maybe they moved on or someone took them in. Now I'm wondering if something else happened to them. One older woman in town who used to come by and feed the cats said she saw something tall and dark sniffing around the trash bins one evening. She said it looked like a wolf on 2 legs, but she only caught a glimpse before running off. She was so frightened she refused to come back. I'm not sure if it's related, but the timing lines up with when I first found those massive claw marks. I know how this sounds. I was skeptical too, up until I started finding physical evidence. Even the hinges on one of the boxcar doors were bent like something powerful pushed on them from the outside. On windy nights, I can't help but glance over my shoulder anytime I hear rustling. I keep telling myself it's just the wind blowing through the old depot's gaps, or a raccoon in the nearby dumpster. But after seeing those marks up close, I'm not entirely sure we're dealing with normal animals anymore. I don't know if this is something the city or the rail authority should be made aware of, or if they'd shrug it off as a prank. Part of me wonders if this is all connected, like if there's been a growth in these sightings around southern Indiana for some reason. I've been reading some news clippings from the Times-Mail archives about strange sightings around the Hoosier National Forest. People often attribute them to escaped exotic pets or misidentified coyotes, but the descriptions sound awfully similar to what folks call dogman. Tall, bipedal, vaguely canine features, unbelievably strong. Doesn't help me sleep better at night. Anyway, I just wanted to lay out everything that's been happening here. It's rattled me more than I'd like to admit, especially since I oversee this place after dark quite a bit. There's a part of me that wants to set up more trail cams at different angles, maybe get some nighttime motion detectors around the property. The other part of me just isn't sure I want to find out what might show up on camera. The idea of having actual proof is both exciting and terrifying. If something that large and predatory is roaming around here, I'm not sure I want to be anywhere near it when it decides to show up again. I'm not exactly sure where to start, because even while writing this, my mind keeps spiraling back to the site of that thing in the cave. It happened this past week, just before dusk, out near the southern edge of the Tonto National Forest in Arizona. Officially, we were responding to a brush fire that had been reported near the banks of the Salt River. I'm part of a volunteer crew, so we mobilized quickly, but we're not as large as a municipal force. We'd done some controlled burns in that area a while back, but this was different. Real flames lighting up the desert scrub in patches that looked too spread out to be a natural progression. I remember how windy it was that afternoon. Hardly a single cloud in the sky, but the gusts were erratic, kicking up dust and tumbleweeds. We reached a point along Bush Highway, near the turnout to Butcher Jones Recreation Site, and we noticed that the fire seemed to be centered further into the brush than we anticipated. The main group hopped off the truck, and we started hauling hose lines through the mesquite and Palo Verde. The terrain was rocky, with enough cacti and scraggly bushes to trip you up if you weren't careful. One of our guys nudged me at one point and mumbled something about hearing movement off to our left, like something was scuttling around. At first, we dismissed it as either a coyote or maybe a stray javelina. We do see wildlife when we respond to these calls, but not too far from where we stood, there's this old cave opening that local hikers sometimes explore. Definitely not a tourist-friendly cave, more of a local secret. You'd only know it if you'd been around the area a while. We made our way closer to the mouth of that cave because the fire line was drifting in that direction, and we didn't want it spreading inside. I've seen videos of how quickly flames can travel into a mine shaft or small cave and just sit there, smoldering. Half my mind was on that risk. The other half was noticing how strangely the fire seemed to have started, as if it had multiple ignition points, not the usual single line spreading outward. While we were knocking down some smaller flames near the cave entrance, I saw a flicker of movement deep in the shadows. The sun was still setting, so the angle of light was tricky, but I swear I caught sight of something tall, like easily over 6 feet, slinking further back into the darkness. At first, I thought it might just be a trick of the light against a tall rock formation inside, but it moved with a definite and deliberate motion. Its silhouette was sharp, kind of angular around the shoulders, the head shape narrowing like a triangular design. I couldn't see much detail in the face, just that the shape was distinctly not human, more reptilian, I guess, like the outspread curve from the top of the head down to a narrower neck. We had one of those powerful handheld spotlights, the kind that can cut through smoke. I was about to aim it inside, but we got an indirect call from a colleague behind us, yelling about a flare-up near a yucca patch behind the truck. For a moment, I hesitated, but the duty train in my head said, "Take care of the fire first, figure out the rest after." I turned around to help them, spraying down the flare-up with water and foam. All the while, a voice in the back of my mind kept insisting I check that cave again. Once we got that patch under control, I hustled back to the entrance. I was still smelling the acrid smoke. My gear felt heavier by the minute, and the sweat was making my goggles fog up. By now, the sun had dipped even lower. The cave was much darker, but the air was still swirling with dust and a bit of lingering haze. When I finally managed to shine my flashlight into that cave's inner chamber, it looked empty. And I know how that goes. Maybe it was a bobcat, or even an odd arrangement of stones that fooled me. But in the pit of my stomach, I had this unshakable certainty that I watched something distinctly reptilian slip away. I muttered something to one of the others about needing an extra set of eyes, but they made an offhand joke about me seeing the Lizard King or something. They just laughed it off because a lot of folks here like joking about the desert having strange creatures. Then again, over the years, we've heard all kinds of local legends. Folks around the outskirts of Phoenix talk about bizarre sightings, especially near the Superstition Mountains. Massive shapes moving among the shadows, reptile-like footprints in the hardened mud, that sort of thing. I typically brush those stories aside as tall tales, but this time I'm not so quick to sneer. We didn't have that much time to linger. The rest of the evening was spent chasing hotspots along the riverbed. By the time we called it a night, I was too exhausted to do any real investigating, but I can't get it out of my head. The shape of that head, the way it seemed to glide deeper in, like it was fluid and at home in those tunnels. I've crawled into enough cave entrances while doing search and rescue to know what normal wildlife looks like, and that did not match any usual suspect. Everyone else on the crew wants to blow it off, chalk it up to stress or fatigue. I'm the only one who can't let it go that easily. I did return the next day on my own time, just to poke around the charred remains of the brush. The area around the cave entrance was ash and scorched earth, but I couldn't see any obvious footprints or tail marks, just a lot of debris. It's possible I missed signs because there was so much loose rock and fresh soot. And I'll openly admit, I felt uneasy standing there by myself, like I was intruding on something or being watched from within. I'm sending this to you specifically, because no one else seems to believe me. I'm not sure what else to do with this story. I'm not an expert on cryptids or anything like that, but I know the difference between a coyote slinking off and what I saw. There was a definite intelligence in the way it moved. It was bipedal, with arms that were set in front, almost like a person in a forward-lean posture, but the shape of the head, that's what stays pinned in my thoughts. It was more elongated, with ridges that looked almost like pointed protrusions across the top.